Story 1. This is something they have been trying to do for about 30 years. It never made any rational sense, but now it just seems like a grudge. Story 2. It is no longer just an executive order. It is a federal law. Cannot just stop that. It will take effect while it is being appealed. Story 3. I think there is a comment section below the news post for people to share their thoughts. These are just copying and pasting the news and disguising it as a question because anything with the word Trump gets attention for gaining karma. Story 4. Is AskReddit just our /political thing X just happened? What are your thoughts now? There are plenty of other subreddits where people can discuss this sort of thing and link the actual article to. There is no need to turn this into one as well. Story 5. Removing politics from the situation, the United States Congress has the power of the purse. It is one of their checks not just on the executive branch but on the judicial branch as well. I find it highly suspect that a court can force Congress to allocate money where they explicitly do not want to. Story 6. Looking at this pragmatically and legally, I think Reddit users are not paying attention to the case details. The question posed could just as easily have been, what do you think about conservatives? Since that is how Reddit will respond regardless of the details. Regarding the judge's ruling, the bill itself does not specifically name Planned Parenthood. Instead, it tries to prevent funding from going to medical providers who also offer abortion services. To be clear, the federal government is already prohibited from funding any abortion services under existing laws. This bill targets providers that offer both abortion and non-abortion services. However, the judge is saying that for the next 14 days, funding cannot be withheld from Planned Parenthood on the grounds that it provides abortion services. This does not apply to any other affected providers and will be reviewed after that period. It seems likely this will have to escalate to a higher court to be fully resolved. Planned Parenthood may argue that this is a breach of existing constitutional rights related to protected speech. Story 7. A judge ruled that a bill passed into law by both the House of Representatives and the Senate and signed by the President is unlawful. Story 8. Forgetting that it is Planned Parenthood funding. That is a minefield. Just looking at cutting the funding. He could not do it via executive order, so he got Congress to defund it. Are judges allowed to remove line items from bills that are signed into law? I'm going to have to do more reading around it because it just seems insane to me. Is the judiciary the pinnacle? Is an unelected district judge the most powerful person in the country, running the finances through injunctions? Story 9. Good. I don't know why this is so hard for people to understand, but abortions performed at a Planned Parenthood facility are either self-funded or charitably funded. Planned Parenthood is a two-part business entity and separated the abortion care side from the reproductive care side to appease right-wing critics who interfere in others' healthcare. The funding that would have been cut includes services like prostate and cervical cancer screenings, birth control pills, pap smears, sexually transmitted disease treatments, and more. Story 10. On one hand, good outcome. On the other hand, I agree that individual judges blocking the entire executive office from taking action leads to a very bad situation where the opposition goes judge shopping to find one that aligns with them politically and files suit in their jurisdiction. It bypasses checks and balances and intentionally politicizes the courts that are meant to be apolitical. Story 11. Planned Parenthood literally helped me keep my baby alive in the womb when I did not have insurance. I had a hemorrhage that needed to be monitored, and they did just that. They also treated me for yeast and bladder infections over the years. They treated my male friend for gonorrhea as well. It makes me very angry that people want to get rid of it. It is just an attack against the poor and women, but it is portrayed as saving babies. Only 2% of their services are abortions, none of which occur in the third trimester, and very few are in the second trimester. Story 12. Genuinely curious, on what basis did the judge block it? I am pro-choice, but I have a hard time seeing the government as obligated to fund Planned Parenthood. Story 13. They are currently withholding after-school funding that was not even cut, so obviously they will do the same for Planned Parenthood as well. It is clear they are pushing boundaries, and there is no effective mechanism to control them. Story 14. Congress passed a law that provided funding to Planned Parenthood. In the Build Back Better Act, Congress recently rescinded that funding. That is how democracy works. The judge is biased and appears to view abortion as a sacred act. Story 15. It is very inappropriate that the district judge thinks they can usurp the power of the United States Congress. They should be disbarred and punished accordingly. Story 16. Congress controls spending. Whichever side of the debate you are on, it is clear that they are allowed to do it even if you believe morally they should not. Story 17. If I understand correctly, the Supreme Court has recently ruled that decisions like this only apply to that judge's own district. Story 18. Abortion is healthcare. Having said that, 95% of what Planned Parenthood does is not abortion-related. Story 19. While I support Planned Parenthood and would love for it to be covered by my tax dollars, I honestly do not see how a judge can block government policy on what gets funded. With recent rulings about national injunctions, I do not understand what block means here. Planned Parenthood is not a right, not enshrined in the Constitution, and how it is funded is purely dictated by legislative law. Whether I like the Build Back Better Act or not, I do not. It was signed into law, and thus what it funds is legal. We voted for this, the collective we, not the individual. Story 20. Trump wants to cut many vital services like Planned Parenthood to save money, but that money is not going to help anyone who actually needs it. It is not going toward healthcare, food assistance, housing, or any of the programs working people rely on. He and his associates are gutting those as well while making the tax cuts for the wealthy permanent. Trump is a walking and talking disgrace. Story 21. This feels like political theater at this point, the same old attacks on Planned Parenthood with no real legal basis. The courts keep shutting it down, but they will probably keep trying anyway. Story 22. Good news. Planned Parenthood is not a government-funded abortion clinic. They offer many resources and services for reproductive care, including support for healthy pregnancies and babies. Story 23. It was done by a district judge. The Supreme Court of the United States has made it clear that these judges cannot issue nationwide injunctions. Former President Donald Trump can ignore this and continue. Judges do not get to make laws. Story 24. People are so uninformed. Planned Parenthood provides many services, not just abortion. They also offer pre-pregnancy and post-pregnancy services. Story 25. The judiciary should not overrule legislative action unless the legislative action is unconstitutional. Story 26. It is always temporary. It is just to give the illusion of justice. It will keep going as planned, unfortunately. Story 27. Individual states also have cause to sue since Alaska and Hawaii are exempt for now from Medicaid and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program cuts. Story 28. Can a judge do that with literally everything else? The other cuts are going to be so catastrophic. Story 29. He cannot. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that circuit judges only have authority within their own jurisdiction. This means that Trump cannot cut funding in Cleveland, but nationwide he is allowed to do so. Story 30. Increased access to health care is beneficial. Misinforming people about the services provided by Planned Parenthood causes unnecessary anger. Story 31. This is just going to add more fuel to former President Donald Trump's claims that the judiciary is full of unelected bureaucrats who have a stranglehold over the governmental process. And in this particular case, it is true. This temporary restraining order likely should not have been granted, and the judge overstepped her bounds considerably. Planned Parenthood is arguing, in essence, that this bill is a pretext for an attack on Planned Parenthood itself and that the intent of the bill was to specifically target the organization, supposedly as punishment for its advocacy. However, the standards of granting a temporary restraining order include a likelihood of success on the merits, and there is almost certainly no way Planned Parenthood is going to win. The United States Congress simply banned family care providers who perform abortions and had over $800,000 in revenue in Medicaid payouts from receiving federal funds for non-abortion care. Yes, this primarily affects Planned Parenthood, as there are not many large abortion providers, but Congress is well within its purview to regulate who gets federal funds as long as it does so in a constitutional manner. So, while Planned Parenthood technically has an argument, it is weak. The temporary restraining order should not have been granted, and former President Donald Trump is probably going to make hay out of this judicial overreach. Story 32. How? This is a legislative action. By what reasoning can a judge tell Congress that it must allocate this into the budget? Story 33. Proud that people are standing up to that disastrous president. They never should have been allowed to overturn Roe versus Wade in the first place. Story 34. My thoughts are that the Supreme Court of the United States will decide 6-3 that this judge does not have the authority to block the President of the United States' actions across the board and will rule in favor of Donald Trump during his appeal. Story 35. So now a judge can block a law that has been passed by both houses of the United States Congress and signed by the President of the United States. This blockage will be quickly overruled. Story 36. I think we do not need an AskReddit thread for every single headline. Discussions about a topic should take place in the relevant thread where the article is easily accessible. Story 37. At this point, anything to slow down this administration from hurting as many people as possible. Story 38. My question is, why doesn't some actually half-decent billionaire or coalition of billionaires and mega-millionaires like Mark Cuban or someone step up and help out? Obviously, they shouldn't have to, but it sure would beat losing Planned Parenthood. Story 39. The Supreme Court of the United States will issue a 6-3 decision stating that there is no history and tradition of funding Planned Parenthood, so it is not allowed to exist. Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson will write 2-3 dissents that left-leaning legal scholars will describe as powerful because they are coherent and contain reasoning, even though they have no power. Story 40. This freeze is a necessary step to protect access to critical healthcare services beyond termination of pregnancy. Removing funding without a clear name or justification feels like a covert attack on reproductive and preventive care. Story 41. A judge cannot block what Congress passed. They can take it to the Supreme Court to determine if it is constitutional or not. There is nothing in the Constitution stating that the United States must give organizations money. Story 42. It would be nice to see some legal justification for the ruling. As it stands, I do not see how the judge's ruling could survive an appeal. Story 43. Seriously, what is with all the political posts here lately? I do not need to know Donald Trump's life story the minute it unfolds, and as a non-United States Redditor, I am not interested either. Talk about something else. The rest of the world exists too. Story 44. That judge will fail spectacularly. Congress makes the laws, and they made this one once it was approved by both houses. It is not Donald Trump's law, as much as he might want to take all the credit. The judge will be overturned by the Supreme Court because at least they understand the roles of the three branches of government. Story 45. I was very young and didn't have involved or safe parents. I lived in a rural area without doctors in town. I had no money or car, no access to an insurance card, and didn't know how any of that worked. I learned enough in sex education in school to know that my much older boyfriend needed to get tested, so I brought him to Planned Parenthood. I went there for condoms. When I needed birth control, I went there as well. They gave me cancer screenings. I paid what I could, and sometimes that was nothing. They didn't tell my dad, and they never mailed me anything. They are not evil. They help people. Not everyone has caring parents, and not everyone has access to services. It is not like they are luring people in to hold them down and abort their pregnancies. Story 46. If I could choose where my taxpayer dollars went, I would opt out of funding abortion. Granted, there are some situations where the risk outweighs the outcome, but just aborting because you were not having responsible sex is a no for me. Story 47. Planned Parenthood is crucial to women, especially those with low income. It offers extensive gynecological support, including diagnosing and treating common issues with sensitive vaginal flora, cancer screenings, and affordable birth control. I cannot fathom how many women will lose access to potentially life-saving care if funding is cut. I am deeply concerned. Story 48. As bad as it is, if Congress voted to cut Planned Parenthood, how can judges change that? Judges are supposed to enforce the law, and Congress makes laws. Story 49. Abortion is not federally funded, and almost all the money goes to keeping women healthy. Story 50. I have zero hope that the court order will stand. However, women will die from this defunding, and the anti-abortion party does not care. It seems to me that taking all the money from an organization where 3% of their provided services are abortions is not very anti-abortion. Pap smears and mammograms save lives. The lives of the poor also matter. Story 51. Trump is trying to appeal to people who think Planned Parenthood is just an abortion clinic. They also provide birth control, abortion alternative programs, prenatal care, cancer and sexually transmitted infection screenings, as well as general education on sexual and reproductive health. Story 52. Everything I need to know about the people who hate Planned Parenthood came from an interaction where I showed someone the hard numbers, that the existence of Planned Parenthood reduced the number of abortions overall, and their response was, "It doesn't matter because I don't want fewer abortions, I want them to stop doing anything at all." There is no compromise with fanatics. Their actions are violence against the vulnerable and should be treated as such. Blocking this move is the absolute least that should be done, and the fact that it was ever seriously considered should disqualify everyone involved from public office forever. Story 53. The judge does not have the authority to override Congress. Planned Parenthood does not have a constitutional right to government funding. This order will be overturned on appeal, as has happened many times this year when a judge attempted to act beyond their authority. Story 54. 1. If it is not in the Constitution, then it is left to the states as stated in the 10th Amendment. 2. Which other right, which abortion clearly is not in the eyes of the law, is subsidized by the federal government. The Second Amendment, is the government going to pay for our guns? The First Amendment, is the government going to give me money to start a news website? The right to freely assemble, is the government going to pay for permits? Story 55. It is a positive development, but its significance is uncertain. States should not have the authority to restrict abortion rights. Abortion should be legal everywhere, easily accessible and free. Story 56. Planned Parenthood is the primary healthcare provider for many women. Cutting Planned Parenthood funds is equivalent to cutting Medicaid funds and is just as harmful. Story 57. I went to Planned Parenthood once because I had itching in my vagina and needed it checked. I still don't trust the outcome. I was told it was a wart. I had had no sexual contact up to that point, so I was confused, but I didn't have a trusted general practitioner. So I made a follow-up appointment to have it addressed. The nurse I dealt with during my follow-up upset me. I struggle with medical procedures, so I asked, "What kind of pain is it?" "Burning off a wart." "Is it chemical or fire or something else?" She looked at me with a nasty expression and said, "Well, I don't know. I've never had a sexually transmitted disease. Except I hadn't had sex yet either. I had the wart burned off. It was miserable. I actually filed a complaint about the nurse because I'm not good at keeping my mouth shut. The point is this. I can't imagine having to tell my parents any of this. The same shame at 19 exists at any age. The ability to access basic healthcare services should never be diminished. Ever. Story 58. What are my thoughts? My thoughts are that even though some inappropriate former president-loving judge may overturn this right away, it is reassuring that there are at least some judges who will not support this hateful, vile behavior. We need lawmakers and judges who will stand up for the country and fight back against the former president's illegal actions that are designed to harm people. Story 59. The judiciary is ruined by fascist judges. This will be overturned. I welcome any efforts to delay the dismantling of America. May the fascists be defeated soon. Story 60. Another judge will reverse this block soon, and the funding cut will continue as scheduled. The courts are lost to make America great again too. The only way to stop this is if Americans vote every Trump-supporting Republican out of office, which America is not going to do. Story 61. Planned Parenthood does much more than provide abortion services. They are vital to the community. I worked there for 3 years and left only because there were no opportunities for growth. I will always support them and a woman's right to bodily autonomy. Story 62. Planned Parenthood is not a federal agency, so there should be no issue with reminding being stopped. If someone wants an abortion, they should pay for it. If it is a medical necessity, then it should be allowed to be claimed on insurance. If it is the result of sexual assault, then the victims' fund should pay for it. Story 63. Good. I know people who oppose abortion do not want to hear this, but Planned Parenthood does more than provide abortions. They are a much-needed clinic that will be even more in demand with the closures of rural hospitals already happening. I mean, I know the current administration views miscarriages as a criminal offense, but cutting off the prenatal care that pregnant people need and deserve is just ensuring that more end up grief-stricken and in jail. Story 64. It is only a matter of time before the Supreme Court of the United States ends these types of injunctions as well as everything else they do not like. Apparently, while their rulings must be followed, the Constitution is just a bunch of suggestions. Story 65. Anything to stop these literal traitors from dismantling our federal government, robbing us blind, and weakening our nation. Story 66. I really do not like that Republican Party members are stress testing the United States government looking for weak points. It is not healthy governance. Story 67. These people do not care about anything except the emotional utility of trolling and inflicting cruelty. The only thing they care about is hurting others while remaining unbothered in a sociopathic way. None of it is real or ideological. They are simply addicted to shoving the smallest kids they can find into lockers because it makes them feel powerful for 2 seconds before they have to do it again. They do not care about 1 million dead in the United States from COVID-19, increases in both infant and maternal mortality rates under abortion bans, dead children in Gaza, people dying without United States Agency for International Development, deaths from addictions to violence and firearms, millions losing health care, children dead from measles outbreaks, 100 dead in a flood due to climate change, torture, prisons, shattered families, or any of it. They do not care at all. And they think that is a superpower. The field of graves these people have danced on stretches as far as the eye can see, and they are just beginning. They are a virus, a mindless, murderous, host-killing corruption of the building blocks of life. A single strand of non-sentient hatred that does nothing but infect others to keep the damage going until everything is dead. And it is a choice, every day an active choice, to exterminate others for no reason other than being despicable. They will not stop. They must be stopped. Story 68 makes more sense than the incremental violations of separation of church and state that are so perverse in the minds of some that they actually think it means they are all tax exempt and can meddle in the affairs of government without the people having a say. Story 69. My thoughts are that the Supreme Court of the United States is going to end up blocking all court actions against Donald Trump, including their own. Story 70. Reproductive health was already declining. I do not regret my choice to remain celibate for the foreseeable future because I have no faith in anything right now. Story 71. Does the judge have the power to do that? Or does he also have to challenge the parts of the Better Business Bureau that make it so lower judges have no real power to stop Trump on a national scale? Story 72. The people should get what they voted for or what they did not bother to vote for. Story 73. Are we at the point where, regardless of which party has the majority, a random judge from the opposing side can put everything on hold? Story 74. I know that nobody listens or cares about the rules anymore, but what happened to the separation of church and state? Frankly, all of these abortion and women's body control issues could be resolved if, at the very moment the politician mentions that the Bible has any influence on their decision, they lose their vote. Story 75. They will just do it anyway, as they have done the entire time a judge has pretended to still hold power. This country is ruled by Trump and his supporters at this point. Story 76. Fake judge, totally un-American. Send them to the amazing crocodile albatross. I love that place, by the way. Satan is a friend for helping me make this a reality. Go America. Story 77. I disagree with the policy, but I do not understand why it was blocked. It was only blocked for 14 days, and the entire ban on funding is only for 1 year, which I also do not understand. There are many confusing parts to this. Story 78. How can a judge block a provision of a bill passed by both chambers of Congress and signed into law unless it is unconstitutional? Funding for Planned Parenthood is discretionary. The judge overstepped his or her authority. Story 79. I paid for my vasectomy at Planned Parenthood out of pocket instead of having it done at no cost to me at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I heard Make America Great Again loves when veterans spend federal tax dollars from their disability to help restore abortion access to women. Story 80. The Trump administration is doing exactly what I expected. Given the number of federal judges who wish to sue the administration at the drop of a hat, the Trump administration has proposed no money in the budget for Title X in 2026. To balance the budget, avoid adding debt to the United States debt, and halt continued harassment from the bench, I suggest the Trump administration tie the budget to the anticipated revenue received by the Treasury for that budget year. In other words, if the Treasury anticipates $5 trillion in receipts for 2026, then $5 trillion is the budget for 2026. Story 81. Mike Pence defunded and closed Planned Parenthood in 2014 in the state of Indiana, and it single-handedly and directly caused the largest HIV epidemic in the history of the United States. So much so that the Trump administration then had to spend nearly $1 billion in federal grants and aid to contain it. I do not give a damn what you think of Planned Parenthood services. They literally save lives in many ways. Story 82. No, it targets a specific healthcare provider while maintaining the same benefits for other providers, which is illegal. Story 83. I would really like to see the Democratic Party take the lead on proposing funding cuts. They are simultaneously blaming the Republican Party for not reducing spending enough while also blaming Donald Trump for the cuts he did make. It is almost guaranteed to be political suicide for a Democratic representative to put forth concrete solutions rather than platitudes. The vast majority of the country already agrees that military intervention must end, so foreign military spending is definitely on the chopping block, but seemingly everything else is existentially important to them. Story 84. I cannot provide an opinion on specific political developments or court decisions. These topics are often divisive and people have strong feelings on both sides. What is your opinion? Story 85. Interesting move. It seems like the courts are keeping things in check for now. I am curious to see how it plays out. Story 86. My thoughts are that there are too many people who do not understand the wide scope of essential healthcare and disease prevention that Planned Parenthood provides. Story 87. It is good to see the courts stepping in to ensure healthcare access is not caught in political crossfire. Whatever your stance on Planned Parenthood, many people rely on their basic services such as screenings and checkups. Funding decisions should be made with public health in mind, not just politics. Story 88. I do not like it, but as far as I know, it was passed by the United States Congress, which has the power to do so. Seems legal as far as I know. Story 89. This feels deliberate and aligns with this administration's modus operandi. Many contested policies are argued in court until they are ultimately deferred to the Supreme Court, where a supportive majority will rule in favor of Donald Trump and establish new legal precedent. Story 90. Can a judge uphold a law passed by the United States Congress and reduce spending? It is not a constitutional issue, so what are the grounds for an injunction? Story 91. Well, America is obviously a fascist dictatorship. They will do anything and everything they want because the citizens are cowards who accept their domination. Story 92. Do you want to hear my opinion about the judge blocking a provision of the Build Back Better Act regarding slowing the flow of money to Planned Parenthood? Story 93. I am for defunding, but I also think from a practical standpoint that the Supreme Court will shut this judge down anyway. I could be wrong. This is just my opinion. Story 94. This was not a class action, was it? I do not think they will listen to the judge. Also, this was done by the United States Congress. I do not know how that works when Congress passes something. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.